She broke the sword herself. That is the detail that separates Riven's story from every other soldier's story. Not the war. Not Ugzish, Ibagzish, the atrocity. Not the exile. The moment she stood alone in the dark and shattered the one thing that had kept her alive, the thing Noxus had given her as a reward, as a mark of favor, as proof that she belonged, and discovered that even then, even with the blade in pieces at her feet, the weight of what she had seen did not lift. She had been trying to break free of Noxus. What she could not yet understand was that Noxus had already broken free of her first. New here? Subscribe. Every week, a League of Legends story told the way it deserves to be. Heard. The Empire runs on orphans. This is not a cruel observation. It is a structural one. Noxus requires bodies. It requires bodies, willing to go where it points them, willing to absorb whatever comes next, willing to believe, genuinely and completely, not as performance, that what the Empire is doing is worth the cost. Bodies with that kind of commitment do not come from comfort. They come from people who have already lost enough that the Empire's offer of belonging feels like something real. Riven lost both parents before she was old enough to choose anything. Her father died in a war whose name she was never given. Her mother died in the difficulty of bringing her into the world, a particular cruelty, the kind that leaves a child responsible for a grief they had no part in choosing. She grew up on an imperial farm in Noxus's rocky outer territories, hard land, thin food, the kind of childhood that forges either something broken or something very hard to break. The children there survived through physical strength and the specific stubbornness of people who have no softer option available. Every year she watched the officers come. The recruiters, the men who moved through the farms looking at the children the way a craftsman looks at raw materials, assessing weight, strength, potential utility. She watched other children get chosen and leave for something larger than the farm. She wanted to be chosen, not for glory, not for conquest, for the thing the Empire promised underneath all the rest of it, a place, a family that would not be taken from you by a war or a difficult birth, a framework that held. When they finally looked at her, really looked, not past her, she did not hesitate. She was a natural. The weight of a weapon in a hand that has spent years lifting, hauling, pulling against resistant earth. There is a translation that happens. The body already knows effort, already knows the specific patience of working against something that will not cooperate. Combat is, in many ways, the same negotiation with a less forgiving partner. Riven adapted faster than almost anyone in her cohort, faster than recruits twice her age. The senior fighters noticed, the way she noticed, things. The way she committed to a direction without the hesitation that gets people killed. Pristrist. She was given a blade. Pristrist. Not a standard issue blade. A weapon forged from Runic Stone, black stone enhanced by the magic of the Empire's artificers. Larger than most warriors could manage, heavier than practical. The kind of weapon given as a statement. We believe you can carry this. It was the clearest thing Noxus had ever said to her, and she received it the way someone receives the first proof that they were right to trust. She believed in the Empire the way people believe in things that have replaced a family, completely, without reservation, with a loyalty that asked no questions because questions felt like ingratitude. Her unit became her people. The oath she had made to Noxus felt as real and permanent as anything she had ever known. Then came the Ionian campaign. Here is what the Noxian High Command understood about Ionia that they did not share with the soldiers being sent there. It was not going to end quickly. Land itself seemed to resist. The people had a relationship with their ground that was different from anything the Empire had encountered before, not just defensive, but intrinsic, as if the soil and the trees and the rain were participating in the resistance. But plans had been made, resources had been committed. Is a people be beleka pay, be beleka pay, beleka pay. The campaign would continue regardless of what it found. Riven's unit was assigned escort duty through the Navori region, a territory already scarred by the advance, already showing the particular exhaustion of a place that has been fought over for too long. They were accompanying another Noxian detachment led by an officer named Gansmith. The detachment had brought something with them from Zahn, a chemist, and with the chemist, a collection of sealed containers that no one in Riven's unit had been given information about. She did not like the feel of it. The way the men traveling with those containers held themselves. The way questions about the cargo were redirected rather than answered. In a culture that ran on direct answers, indirection was its own kind of alarm. The terrain turned against them. Rain came down in volumes that transformed hillsides into rivers. The column was moving through a narrowing valley when the Ionians emerged from the positions they had been holding, patient and exact, waiting for exactly this kind of conditions. The mud, the reduced visibility, the column stretched thin and slow. Riven sent for support immediately. What came back was not support. What came back was fire, Noxian arrows, lit, arcing down from the ridge above, not aimed at the Ionians, aimed at the column, at the containers. She understood in the moment before impact what she was watching, not a miscalculation. A decision. The containers were never weapons to be deployed against the enemy with precision. They were weapons to be deployed against this valley, these people, Ionian and Noxian alike, as a demonstration. As a message to every territory that had not yet bent to the Empire about what resistance ultimately cost. The canisters ruptured. The chemical fire that came out of them was not fire in any ordinary sense. It moved differently. It clung. It found gaps in armor. The screaming came from both sides of the engagement, simultaneously, in languages Riven spoke and languages she did not, the same specific sound. The same specific thing underneath the sound, which is the moment a person understands that. The damage being done to them cannot be undone. Her blade's runic enchantment protected her. The same magic that the Empire had given her, as a belishe. Mark of favor now formed a barrier against the burning, against the chemical corruption in the air. She was shielded. The people around her, her unit, the Ionians, everyone in that valley, were not. She watched all of it. There are moments that do not end when they stop happening. They continue in the person who survived them. They come back at night with the specific fidelity of a memory that the mind cannot metabolize and so keeps returning to, unchanged, offering it again as if repetition might produce a different result. The hours that followed came back to her afterward only in fragments. She carried the wounded. She could reach. She counted the dead she could find. She stood in the silence after and looked at what the Empire, her empire, the one she had given everything to, the one that had given her a place and a weapon and a purpose, had done to its own soldiers alongside the soldiers of the people they had come to conquer. The sword in her hand had saved her life. She hated it. The runes carved into the blade felt like mockery now, like the marks of a belonging that had turned out to be conditional on her not looking too closely at what she was belonging to. Every time she looked at the weapon, she saw the valley. Every time she touched it, she felt the weight of the protection it had provided her and the people around her had not received. She had to break it. Not as protest, not as performance, as the only honest act left available to her. The blade had come from Noxus. It carried Noxus's mark. She could not carry it into whatever came next. When it finally shattered, the Runic Stone cracking along lines she had worked at with everything she had left, The pieces did not disappear. They stayed with her. Somehow that was more honest than the whole thing had been. Even broken, it remained. Even broken, it was still hers. She exiled herself before anyone could exile her. She went to Ionia. Not for forgiveness. She did not believe she had any right to ask for that. She went because it was the place she had harmed most directly, and because staying inside Noxus's borders felt like continuing to lie about what she was. The war-scorched territories of Ionia received her the way a burned field receives rain, without ceremony, without warmth, with only the bare minimum of tolerance that exhaustion produces. She was not there long before she discovered that the broken blade she carried still held power. The pieces of the Runic Stone had not become inert when they shattered. They had become something different, shards of a whole that she could reassemble through concentration, through will, through the specific force of her own intention. The sword would never be what it was, but it was something. Hers in a way it had never quite been when it was whole and given by carer for someone else. The exile became a reckoning. She moved through Ionia's wounds, learning what her presence had contributed to. An elder died because of her, a teacher, a healer, a person the village had organized itself around for decades. The need she carried destroyed what the village could least afford to lose. She did not receive the judgment she expected. Ionia, or at least this small part of it, offered something she had not factored into any calculation: the possibility of remaining in a place you have harmed without being destroyed by it. She did not understand this. It did not fit the Noxian framework she had grown up inside, where harm was repaid and debts were settled with finality. She stayed anyway. Runeterra is shifting. The balance of power that held for long enough to feel permanent is moving again. Not slowly, but with the specific acceleration of systems that have been under pressure for too long. And somewhere in Ionia, a woman who carries a broken sword and the weight of a valley in Navori is asking herself the question she has been unable to answer since the moment the canisters ruptured. What does a person become after the thing they believed in turns out to be something they, Dian, cannot believe in anymore? The sword is still broken. The pieces still hold together when she needs them to. She is still not sure what that means. Is sor kizbaf? She keeps moving. That, at least, she knows how to do. Tiesalo. If this story reached you, subscribe. Every week, the full lore of a League of Legends champion, told the way it was meant to be heard.